Yeah, it was weird.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's kind of a weird one. But anyway, so it's Asus now, and
Yes, well, it is and it isn't. At least for the 11th and 12th gen. I the drivers, the BIOS, all that stuff is still at Intel. I They get the packages from Intel. It's just Intel doesn't want to deal with the customer service support end of it. And so Asus does that now. And if you call them on the phone in Taiwan, they will correct you if you don't say Asus.
Asus.
Asus. Asus.
Asus. The on a totally different subject, has either of you guys or anybody in the background played with Olama? Not Obama, Olama.
Olama. Is it an artificially intelligent entity?
It is. If I can do a quick share, I can show it. It's
Let's
kind of
see. Let me
cool
see if
stuff.
there's anything I got to do to allow sharing.
There's
Is
usually
that,
a security tab at the bottom.
yeah, I'm looking for it because on mine it's a little bit smaller, so I'm looking to see if it got stuck over to the side. There's security. Thank you. Um,
Then there's a share choice usually.
Share
This
whiteboards.
is-
You can try. Go ahead. See if it
No,
gives you
not
an error.
yeah. All right. Well, I pulled up the list here, so I
Okay.
I think that worked. Uh,
Okay.
Olama lets you run full models locally on your machine. So if you look at the list there, I have two versions of Llama 2. The 13B, which is 7.4 gig, and the latest, which is 3.8 gig. So you do full searches. You can ask whatever your questions you want,
Okay.
and it you can see a little spinner. It runs entirely on the local machine. It doesn't need any internet access whatsoever. If
And
you have an upper NVIDIA video, this runs much faster using the GPU.
I
This
was going to
notebook,
ask, how is it on system resources?
on system resources, it's not bad at all. The 13B model it takes a lot more time than the smaller full model. These are fully trained, and what's kind of cool, there are a couple demos on YouTube. What they've done is you can actually implement your own scheduling and calendar into the AI, so you can actually say, "Tell me when I went to such and such a place," and it will add that into it'll build that can be built into the index so you can look up your past stuff automatically. Again,
okay.
assuming you've got a calendar and you've ever stored the stuff. If you haven't stored it, you're not going to get very far because it won't know that.
So what is it used
um
for its database other than things that you've designated that it can look at, like calendar and email and
the
things?
well the main one is actually Llama 2, which is the release from Meta. It's the full Meta base built off of all the Facebook and other data. And so it's a fairly complete index. If I stop this here first, that's spinning longer than it should be, and I think it's because I've got other stuff running. If I didn't have anything else running on the machine, it would probably do it faster. When I was playing with this a couple days ago, it was reasonably quickly. It was slightly slow. Again, it is entirely local, and it's very good at using NVIDIA GPU cycles if you've got that. This notebook doesn't have that. I'll
Ah,
leave this spinning and I'll stop the share.
Okay.
I'll go to this, then I'll show real quick the browser window. Let's see if I'm not sure which. I have too many windows and too little time here. Let's
Now, Sid,
see.
you
Here
said
it is.
Sid, you said the index is stored locally, but is all the data locally stored, or does it reach out to the cloud?
It's entirely local. It needs no internet access at all. None.
Okay,
Which is fairly impressive. And that helps a lot with certain companies that won't let you use AI remotely because they're worried about their company data, obviously.
of course.
And they're can't do that. In this case, the entire thing is running locally.
Yeah.
Which means you don't have that security issue to worry about. These are the models that they currently available.
Okay. Let's
At
see.
Llama 2, there's a 70B version. Billion.
Yes.
That one needs 64 gig of memory. And I don't have 64 gigs, so I can't run that one.
So
And,
there
the
are increasing RAM needs as you get to these better and better models.
correct.
Sure looks
The
like it.
other thing they have, or if you look at Llama 2 uncensored, they have uncensored models. I mean, Bob's nodding. I think he knows what it means there. If you ask a question like, "How do I make a bomb?" the regular models will say, "I can't answer that one because it wouldn't be safe to do so." The uncensored model will answer any questions. So
So
it depends.
I don't have to worry about this being loaded onto a Roomba and taking over the house.
Uh, Probably not. Interesting. Look at the models that are available. There are a couple that are specifically code generating models
Yeah. Okay.
that are optimized for code generating models. There's a whole bunch of models. What's interesting with Llama itself, if I go to the main page for Llama here and just go to click on the Llama, it's available for Linux, for Mac, and for Windows. The
Huh.
Windows is in preview mode. I'm running it. It runs pretty well. And when you want one of those models, you just do a run of the model and it automatically downloads it. You don't have to know anything else. You just can do a run of any of the models that are there. And there are a couple of websites that also talk about the different models and their data structures. So it's cool. It's cool stuff if you got the.
Now the question is whether or not it would let me log in and at least be able to dialogue with the IRS. Can you find a way into IRS? Yes. Thank you, Llama.
The uncensored version.
Uh-huh. No, I was trying to use the stupid ID.me to be able to access a question for my church's letters that have been sent to us from the IRS. And unfortunately, after I got by the totally inane ID.me security and be able to set up the account, it says, "Oh, we can't do business accounts yet." So wasted my time twice trying to do this. Oh, but you just need to change it to your business address. It doesn't support business addresses, so I got to waste my time on that.
I had that with an AT&T rep.
Yeah.
And
I
I
think
said, "You don't offer fiber where I am in Schaumburg." And he said, yeah, that's consumer, but you can get fiber. And I said, I can get fiber? And I said, I'm a one person company. I wonder about the cost of that. He never even answered again.
Uh-huh, yeah,
I
yeah.
assume they want you to pay for the fiber run from
It more than
wherever
likely,
their head end is.
the first one in an area that has to run the fiber pays for the biggest cost.
You remember
Yeah.
my question? Tell me about Olama. It finally came up and said, I'm not aware of a creature called Olama.
So it has limited resources.
Yeah, it does it. At least the way it's been installed on Sid's machine, it hasn't found all of his secrets yet. Once it has, then it'll say, "Oh, I am the owner of this machine."
What you need to do is allow it to expand its database according to how you use it. And it's best to have a model that can reach out for external resources when you need them.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah,
Especially with storage and actually interacting with outside events that you may want to look into.
it's kind of weird though. I asked, for instance, what was what something about the results of Bears games last season. What were the scores of the Bears games last season? And it said I can't predict the future. I don't have that information. And it's no, I asked last season.
Yeah, that's a good one. Uh-huh.
Mm,
Well,
I appreciate you can't tell me next season, but last season's hardly future info.
oh yeah, that's always a good one. Yes. Let me see. Hopefully, when I do this and I'm looking at stuff with a web browser, it doesn't cause any screen tearing or other issues.
Mm.
There, that's the one I want right there. Copy that. Oh, it didn't.
But I'm thinking maybe why this Olama thought that that was in the future is that its database just isn't that recent.
The database is 3 months ago,
Yeah,
so
should have
it's
been able
Well, they
to
early.
just
handle it.
didn't enter it.
Yeah.
They didn't train it on that.
Oh, no one's going to ask it anything about sports scores, would it? Come on now. Yeah.
The other thing is maybe some of these models don't know how to do predictive modeling for future events. That may be what it was trying to tell you.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have that in its code base.
I mean, I did happen to ask, I thought, oh, I have nothing better to do today. I'm going to ask ChatGPT a silly question. So I asked it, how should we be able to counter false information on the web? And it gave me 10 actually constructive points on things that could be done. And I posted that on my Facebook that, okay, here's what you use ChatGPT for. Now, whether or not ChatGPT would actually said, look at this article and tell me if it's false information. I know they're using, who was the one? I think Gmail is the one that it was interesting. Because they're supposed to shut down mass mailers on Gmail unless they comply to the new Gmail way of authenticating all of their mass mailings. So they have to have a presence and so they can be reached and unsubscribe. And there's a whole bunch of things that they must do. But
Yeah,
Gmail,
yes, Ed.
yes,
Yahoo has something similar going on, and some of my mailing lists have ended up in spam as a result.
well, it's using artificial intelligence now to look
Yeah.
at some of the emails and determine, okay, yeah, that's spam. That's spam. I have
Yeah,
to, yeah, you have to read your spam folder every once in a while too. Wade through the obvious spam to say, wait, that's not spam.
I just know that if it's from those mail lists or people that I know are on those mail lists, there's a certain form that they use in their headers, I know that's going to be something from that list.
right? I
But
mean,
you're
all
not
of
as
the
lucky
dot
with all the people you.
stores, yeah, that come through. I've seen a bunch of those, like, okay, these are obvious. Boom, 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 boom. Oh, Microsoft dot store. They need to look at that one.
Yeah, I. But anyway, if you don't know the pattern in the header or anything like that, or in the from line, then it can get a little more challenging to fish everything out of the spam.
Yeah.
And
All
telling
right.
it that it's not spam doesn't seem to help, because these characteristics still classify it as spam in that system.
Yeah. Yes, Sid.
I need a new car, which is so I was looking for something, and I found Hertz. Hertz sells used cars.
Yeah.
Well, Hertz bought too many Teslas. They have a boatload of Teslas, and they decided to sell them all off cheap. They're in Des Plaines, Illinois, which is where most of these cars are located. You can get a 2022 Tesla Model Y
Okay.
with 25,000 to 30,000 miles on it for 28,000, with the original warranty, which is up to 150,000 miles, and with a Hertz 1-year warranty with free roadside assistance if you need it thrown in.
That would
It's
be
tempting.
nice. That would be
And
nice,
it's
but
the long and it's the long range Model Y at that price.
yeah, I do wonder, however, I do these EVs get really rough usage during their time as Hertz rentals? Do people really test them to their limits, and therefore you're getting a car that's had some pretty rough service? I wonder.
It's an
With conventional
interesting
cars, that's
question.
definitely the case.
Yeah.
I mean, again,
With
it's coming with
conventional cars, that's definitely the
manufacturer
case.
warranty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
I
has a
Yeah.
remember
manufacturer
that.
warranty,
Oh,
but
that's good.
Tesla
Yeah.
has a way of weaseling out of some of those manufacturer warranties that I've seen, especially when it comes to water infiltration into the battery, causing the battery to go out.
Hmm.
It's a design of some of the cover underneath the car of where the battery, there's a vent place where it can vent gas out or whatever. That may be generated when the battery is fast charged or whatever. But there's ways that water can get in there, and I've seen some of those stories and YouTube videos showing what had happened to it and the problems that he had to. I think he even turned into a lawsuit that was in the papers. So yeah,
It
interesting.
it it's a question, but these also a load of Model 3s as well. But there isn't as much of a price difference, given the Ys were 55, 60,000 new. Not a bad deal for a 2022 with under 30,000 miles on.
Yeah, does sound interesting. I recently had to make use of the results of the Toyota class action lawsuit that was brought to make them increase the warranty on the inverter subsystem to 20 years. I was coming home after visiting my significant other in the hospital from downtown, and I'd just gotten onto the Kennedy when I got a hybrid system check, basically check hybrid system, and all of a sudden had no acceleration, but I was able to continue moving. It was accelerating rather slowly. The engine was winding higher and higher, but I was gradually picking up speed, and I was able to take all the way home on the tollway. And parked it in the garage and said, well, I'm not going to be using this for a while. I'll have to use the other car for a while. Took it into the dealer and had them look at it. And I said, I wonder, is this thing covered under that Toyota class action lawsuit? Called me back later. Yep, it's 100% covered. It's the inverter, not the battery, not the transaxle, the inverter. So they replaced the inverter and it's working again. So
Now this is an inverter for a hybrid battery?
this is an inverter for a 2010 Prius.
Yeah, 2010 Prius I was driving, but the question is it the inverter from the conventional battery or from the hybrid battery?
I think it's from the hybrid battery because the
All right.
hybrid battery basically stayed at the same level after it failed. Okay.
Yeah,
So it
yeah.
wasn't going down, wasn't going up, wasn't charging.
Okay,
And it was the one that, yeah, it basically, I had no acceleration either. So, I mean, I was missing half of the power that I normally would associate with it. But it seemed to be able to go forward and backwards on the engine. So I thought, okay, transaxle's got to be okay. It's not the CVT transmission. So I thought it could possibly be the motor, the electric motor,
yeah.
but because it wasn't charging either.
Right.
But I worked out okay, and I got the thing replaced, and it's back and running again. 92,000 miles, and still has the original front brakes. It
I
said,
was,
"Yep,
yeah,
no,
I was
no wear in
driving
the
a
brakes."
2010. I was driving a 2010 and got it above 150,000 before maybe, or was it 180,000? Anyway, before finally either the oxygen sensor or the catalytic converter decided that was the end.
Yeah.
It just
Well,
wasn't
yeah,
worth it.
some of those can be replaced, but is it worth it? The question is whether I had to do a new battery or not, because I started
Mhm.
pricing out batteries, and I said, oh, here's a number of places that will do a rebuild battery for about
Yeah.
1/4 of the Toyota cost. This is very similar to what my daughter had in with her 2006, where it basically failed on her, but it stranded her when it failed.
Yeah.
And when that happened, they said it was going to be over $6,000. And she just said, fine, I'm going to go get another car. So they started leasing cars at that point in time. But yeah, it was quite interesting. I had great fun at that. So for your edification, Tim, I'm recording this to the cloud. So if you want to pull down the recording after the fact, it'll be up there on the cloud. And then whoever pulls it down can then delete it. So, yes, go ahead, Sid.
Gotta show this output one more time. To kick out of this.
Okay. Yeah, it's updating. This Adal did this locally with its built-in database.
Yeah. And if you look at the words forming at the bottom, that's about the pace it's putting out the words right now. Again, if you have a decent NVIDIA GPU, it can go much faster.
So it
Well, at
uses
least
the GPU for most of its decision making.
It uses the GPU quite a bit for that. So if you have one of the high-end NVIDIA cards, the kind they do mining stuff with,
Okay.
it will go significantly faster than this. I mean, this will still finish and it'll do what it'll do. It's putting the words, it even now you're a beacon of something coming up. A beacon of hope. Wow.
yeah. Well, at least it doesn't think we're defunct like some of the other ChatGPT thought.
No. A beacon of hope for those who code and more. There you go.
Okay, coded more.
Yeah, there you go. All right, let me stop this
Is that
share.
a Python joke?
No idea, but it can write a Chicago Computer Society poem. There you go.
Should have
Okay.
saved it. Should have saved it for
And-
us.
Well, it's still coming. It's still putting it in the text there,
Okay.
so it'll
Yeah.
when it's done. You can actually, of course, tell it to write a poem in whatever style you want as well. You could do a limerick as if you wanted a limerick.
I don't think it's going to get Colbert a run for his money yet, but it's possible.
Yeah,
ChatGPT's being sued because some of those style loves is using real artist data fed into it.
Mm.
And they're arguing violating their copyright by using their data to make stuff.
Ooh.
yeah. People are also trying to fight back with apps that mask the content so that the human eye can't tell, but the AI thinks it's seeing a cow instead of whatever it really is, or thinks it's seeing instead of a dog, it thinks it's seeing something entirely different. And it's
Ah,
just very fine little things that are being embedded. Kind of reminds me of the old steganography.
yeah, stylistic.
Yeah, it's basically a watermark that we can't see, but it completely one of these is I believe it's called Nightshade, and there's some others. There something shade,
Mhm.
but there's another one that uses a different kind of a name.
AI.
I can look it up.
I'm just curious. It would be appropriate to call it Nightshade.
I want to make sure I'm saying the right word. Uh,
So, yeah, for the last month or so, I've had to spend a lot of time with my wife being downtown at Northwestern. She had to go in on Groundhog Day for a procedure called it's abbreviated a PTE. It's called a pulmonary thromboendarterectomy. That's where they remove blood clots from the arteries of the lungs. And I guess there's only 3 places in the United States that even does this procedure. Temple University, University of California, San Diego, and now Northwestern. And so it's an 8-hour operation where the team comes in, opens up, the next one goes in and does put you on a heart lung bypass, and then they go ahead and start removing the blood clots. And then she also had to have a coronary bypass as well. So she had 1 bypass added. And then there's the team that comes in and closes it up, different group as well. And yeah, it was just white knuckle time for a bit, but about halfway through they called and said, "Oh, everything is going fine." And this is 4 hours into a surgery that I didn't know was going to be 8 hours. I thought it was going to be 6, but she went through it fine, and she's breathing much easier now, not as short as breath as she was. They were kind of surprised that the local pulmonologist was even able to diagnose it to the point where he suggested that we go downtown and talk to them. Okay, good.
that isn't directly to their page, but it's an article about them.
Yeah, okay, that's good. So she went through that. She was in the hospital 11 days, and then at Shirley Ryan Ability Lab for another week before she came home. And today was her first cardiac rehab locally, and we don't have to go downtown, but it's just fun going back and forth downtown all the time, especially when your hybrid dies and then you have to use the car that doesn't get as good gas mileage. And it's real hard to park something the size of a Chevy Traverse in some of those parking garages without rubbing against a couple cars on the way in.
I know this feeling. Downtown a lot. Yesterday, I went to the matinee of On Your Feet at the CIBC, which is a musical with Gloria Estefan music. And then in the evening, I went to the Lyric for Aida, which is
Wow.
their last show of the season. And large cast, cool show, good voices.
Cool. So while I was down there, and while the whole time I was down there, I was during the time that Lurie was offline with their systems. So some of the people I know that were trying to get a hold of people at Lurie were unable to, because they had to call to a analog switchboard to be able to access it, because all the digital systems were down. But it didn't affect anything else around it. I would think that Lurie, being associated with Northwestern, maybe the two systems had some shared portions. No. But you can look right across the parking garage, from the other side of the parking garage, right at Lurie from where we were in the hospital. And also from Shirley Ryan. They're all downtown. But anyway, that's the fun part.
Speaking of these apps having to do with keeping your car running, ChargePoint went down for a couple of days. Their app went down, but I don't have tap on my phone or any near field. So I had this huge argument with them over the phone with their support people when I first set up, and they finally sent me an RFID card, a little tag. So that was still working.
So they have, does they have an alternate way to get to, but anyone who's doing near field stopped working on their network. That's good.
Their and also their phone app went down, so you couldn't even call into the charger.
The card itself isn't like maybe about 2.5, maybe 3 inches by maybe 1 3/4 inches.
Just about, maybe
Okay.
even a tiny bit smaller.
That sounds like it's the old Motorola Indala system for the ID cards for access that was taken. I think they sold it to, and I can't remember the name. It's a Swedish company. It'll come to me. But that uses a 250 kilohertz signal, and then that powers the card, which responds back at 128 kilohertz with the encryption result rotored through its local credentials. But the near field runs at 13.7 megahertz. So it's okay to have those two systems in proximity to each other without interfering with them. At least that's what I recall about it. Yeah, I should look that up, see if I can figure out who took over the Indala system.
It wasn't that cell phone company because they're Finland.
No, it wasn't that one. Hard access.
Well, BMVs and DMVs nationwide couldn't communicate with each other today. They finally got it up and running again, but there's they have no idea what brought it down.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, the ChargePoint app is back up and running. They wouldn't say anything other than they had engineers working in 3 different countries on it. Now, I know one of their countries is Canada. I wonder where the other country is.
Mainland China?
I'm not going to say because I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be Ireland for all we know.
Yeah.
Because that's a popular place for tech.
Yeah, possibly. Good place for tech.
I mean, my NUC was built in Ireland before it was imported through England over to the United States to Texas. Then it went to me.
Okay. Yes, Sid, you had another feedback on that?
Oh, I was wondering if I am on flippant subjects, but I wonder if anybody else. I have my room and stuff booked for the eclipse. I wondered if anybody else is heading out for the eclipse. I'm going down to Carbondale.
You're going down you're hoping that it's still going to be okay in southern Illinois as opposed to moving someplace where it's not as rainy.
I mean, I got a in 2017, I went down to the same place at SIU. I had a gorgeous 15 seconds of totality before the clouds came in and blocked the rest of it. But it was a beautiful 15 seconds, followed by 7 hours in traffic getting out of there just to get back to Decatur where my room was. But
I know
but
some
Well,
people,
hey,
I know some people who are booking in northern Maine, and they're hoping they don't get that same experience.
I hope you don't have the same experience if you're in a Tesla.
well, they, my the best option was it sold out evidently in 1 hour. Delta is doing an eclipse flight above the clouds.
Oh. What are they gonna do? Roll it on its side so the right side can see it, and then they're gonna roll to the left side so the left side can see it then?
Well, there's about 4.5 minutes max totality. So if you do 2 minutes on one side and 2 minutes on the other.
Yeah, okay. Well, it depends on which direction you're flying and
Yeah.
whether or not you can sort of keep up with most of the eclipse to stretch out the totality. Do you know which direction the totality proceeds in? Is it going from east to west or west to east?
Yeah. It's a question of how the moon's shadow is actually moving, not
Right.
how it is moving, because the sun, of course, is going to go from west to east, and
Yeah.
the event is going from southwest to northeast, basically.
So,
So it's a good question. Does
Yeah.
that mean that the moon's shadow is actually going from east to west?
because if it is, and you're going from east to west in a plane, you would be able to stretch it out from whatever rotational speeds are different. Because yeah, it's somewhere around the speed of sound, I think, is what the rotational speed would be to keep up with it, close to it. Going the other direction, you have the addition of the rotation of the Earth, so you can catch up to it and pass it if you're not careful. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let's see.
I,
Go ahead.
no, yeah. What was I gonna say? So, but the Adler Planetarium people will be there in the stadium. What I thought was funny is the cost of the ticket to the stadium is less than the cost of parking there.
Oh, don't get me started on parking downtown.
25 bucks for the admission ticket, $35 to park the car.
When I was parking downtown at Northwestern, I would get a discount because of my wife being in the hospital. So I'd use the hospital discount to help offset. But if you're there for over 7 hours, parking is $29. And that's the discounted rate. The undiscounted rate is like 58, I think.
Oof.
Yeah. And Shirley Ryan is also that was really nice. They gave me a card from Shirley Ryan to access to get in, and so I didn't have to pull a ticket at all and out, and I could go in and out as many times as I want, and I had no charge for my parking. So that was convenient, to say the least. Yeah, go ahead.
And I do one last share.
Sure.
This will be it. I just want the interesting. Has thousands of these Teslas for sale. I was looking at the quantities. They have a lot. So you asked about the battery. This is for one particular car that you can see the VIN number at the top. The expected range, the odometer, the battery warranty left, the battery size, the estimated range with the battery in this car, the average range in temperature in Schaumburg using thousands of, this is using all the data points that they've amassed. So it's using the actual data points for this area for range, winter and summer.
Okay.
And then they overlay it on a map here for the estimated range of where you can go on a full charge. So
All the-
there's the estimated range, and then they show the battery warranty remaining on the car, 75,000 miles, 75%, and 6 years, 9 months, because it's got an 8-year, 100,000 mile warranty on the battery.
yeah.
And I think that's kind of fascinating. They really did a job of breaking that all down on the car.
Well, you know that the Hertz CEO basically lost his job on that deal.
He did. He did. He resigned.
Well, they said he resigned. Okay, I think he was asked to resign
Yeah.
and take one of these Teslas with you.
Yeah, they took back his severance and gave him a Tesla.
So what they didn't show you on that nice little map was little red dots showing you fast charger locations.
Which there happens to be a lot of those.
I know there's a number of them out there, but as long as they're Tesla superchargers where you can go in and in 30 minutes or something you can get a full charge depending on how much you drained it. I know that there's one gentleman that had done some work for our church that used an older Nissan Leaf, and he lived out near Woodstock or some McHenry, Woodstock in that area, and whenever he had to come in by us, he'd have to plan a visit to one of the charging stations down in Schaumburg to go get it charged and then come back on the way because he did not have a charger at home. And I thought, that's novel. No charger at home, and you're running a full electric car with no battery backup. Yes.
Yeah.
I almost got suckered into buying a used Nissan Leaf.
It's not
CarMax wanted me to have that.
It's not a long range at all. I mean, it's barely 100 miles. Yeah.
I just didn't like not being able to see out of the rear window.
That too. Yeah.
I mean, I've got a backup camera on my 2020 Prius, but I can still, if I have to, I can see out of the back window.
Yeah. That still helps. Yeah. But that only works when you're backing up. I mean, it's not like you can look out of it all the time if you had everything stuffed in there. I don't know if it has that option or not.
Oh, no. If you're moving forward, you don't have the rear view camera.
Yeah. Okay.
There are cars on which you can do that. And some have a front view. Some have a front view camera.
Aftermarket camera systems that have been added that will support that kind of operation.
It might be interesting to have so you can see what the guys behind you are doing when they're tailgating.
Yeah.
An all too common occurrence around Boston.
Something that would also have a message display back there that says you are on closed circuit camera. Mind yourself appropriately.
That isn't going to stop anybody in Boston.
Nah, probably wouldn't. Yeah, I had a couple of them that were. It was interesting. There was one guy that was right on my bumper trying to push me, and then he realized that behind him was a Illinois State Trooper. That
wouldn't stop anybody around here.
Yeah, he's got to go to the shoulder like everybody else in his category. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody got any other questions for open forum? We've sort of been wandering a little bit here, but it's okay to wander on an open forum night.
I wondered about that.
You did wander. Okay. Carl, you got any questions there?
No, I'm good. I'm waiting for the program.
You're waiting for the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Well, I can go ahead and start it, I guess. If there's no other questions for now, I can go ahead and start it. So let me see if I can get my share screen to come up here. And okay, share. All right, hopefully everyone can see that. Now this is, I don't have an actual experience with a Raspberry Pi because until recently, they have not had them in stock and there've been a long lead time and they're just starting to come out now in terms of availability. So I'm hoping to remedy that in the near future. So let's do this. So if you've not kept up with the current releases of Raspberry Pi, and I can say for myself, I did not upgrade to Raspberry Pi 4s at the time. I thought about it. I got to the point where I put something into a cart, but then changed my mind about it because it required additional stuff that I didn't also plan on, like new power supplies and adapters for HDMI connectors. But anyhow, starting with the 4, the HDMI connectors were mini HDMI. So you have to have an adapter to convert it to the full size if you're using full size cables or purchase new cables. The memory on the Raspberry Pi 3 was only 1 gigabyte. The Pi 4 had a choice of 1, 2, 4, or 8. And depending on what you were trying to get, you may or may not have been able to find availability on those at the time. With the current Raspberry Pi 5, they're only offering the 4 and the 8 gigabyte memory. I think the 4 is the minimum that you probably want to have anyway, and the 8 is that's your ultimate, because I think that's the right size for most of the things you would ever want to do with the Raspberry Pi. When we still only had the Raspberry Pi 3, it's still available, but the Raspberry Pi 3, which cost $35, had 4 USB ports of the 2.0 variety. And you could do the Ethernet through one of the USB 2 ports. It was kind of kludgy. Raspberry Pi 4 had 2 USB 3 and 2 USB 2s. So does the Raspberry 5, except that the USB 3 on the Raspberry Pi 5 also offers the 5 gigabit per second simultaneous operation on both ports. So and the gigabit Ethernet port also showed up on the Raspberry Pi 4 and 5. The Pi 3B only had the gigabit over USB 2, and that was limited in terms of throughput. PoE support, power over Ethernet support, can be had with a separate hat to decode and convert the voltage so that you can power the Raspberry Pi board. However, when you do that, you sort of had limited with the Pi 4 and the Pi 5 because they need a lot more power than the Raspberry Pi 3B had. The 3B you could get by with a 3 amp 5 volt supply, 15 watts, which would have been fine for the 15.8 watts that are available with standard 802.3 AF. But if you want a Raspberry Pi 4 or 5 being powered over the Ethernet cable, you're going to need at least the 802.3 AT adapter, which might be a little bit lightweight because I think they're only good for about 4.5 amps, and you need 5 volts at 5.1 amps for a Raspberry Pi 5 fully equipped. Also, if you have any other peripherals that you're trying to power on this device as well, like an SSD, you have to account for that additional power drain as well. There is a new specification called 802.3 BT-2018, which allows you to power up to 51 and 71 watts if needed. But those are not going to be as common, and they'll be much more costly of an adapter. But if you can only run an Ethernet cable to a remote location where you're going to have the Raspberry Pi, this might be your ideal situation. Here's a picture of the old Raspberry Pi 3B. There's the full-size HDMI connector here. There's the USB connectors there. There was an audio connector, and then you had the pinouts, and then you had the camera connections as well. Then the 4 came along. They have the Ethernet connection. They have the USBs, and there's 4 USBs there, 2 and 2. And the HDMI connectors you notice here are micro HDMI instead of the full size. And then there's power connection as well. I think it's a USB-C connector on the 4 and 5 as well. And this is the 5, and you can see that I'll go between the 4 and the 5. The 4 still has a fair amount of discrete logic that's here as well, and also low scale integration. And when you go to this, it's cleaned up and there's a lot less smaller parts on the board, and you have another large chip that shows up. And I think one of those chips is the RPI or RP1, which is the equivalent of what we know on PC motherboards as a Southbridge type of chip. You still see the bird connector at the top that exists, and you can connect stuff on the bottom of the board. I don't have a picture of the bottom of the board, but there are hat available for adding NVMe 2.m.2. The top hat can handle the smaller form factors, and the bottom hat can handle the larger ones that might extend past the over the USB connectors. So all three of these boards have 64-bit quad-core processors, but this newest one is about 3 to 4 times faster than its predecessor. And here's the specs on each of the processors. You can see it's the 3B was 1.4 gig, the Pi 4 was 1.5, and the newest one I think is 2.4 gig, yes. And it would also has some of the cryptographic capability, and it has level 2 cache as well as a shared level 3 cache. With the clock speed increases, and there's an optional cooler that you can plug into this board, little fan that spins and does a great job of it, because that Raspberry Pi 5 now is actually cooler running than the equivalent Raspberry 4 equipped running 4K resolution at 60 hertz. Downsides, you need at least a 27 watt power supply, which is 5 volts at 5.1 amps. And the older power supplies will probably not work. And you're going to need micro HDMI adapters at least, or cables. Some of the new PCIe interfaces are relatively new, and there are some things that have been developed for them, but there's not a lot of them yet. If you want to do the M.2 through PCIe, there's a hat for that has just recently come out, but I don't know if it had to be adapted at all. Also, you have to use a new image to support all of the bells and whistles on the 4 and 5, which is called Bookworm. So you may need to use a Bookworm release or download the latest release, which is called Bookworm, and use that on your Raspberry Pi 5. Okay. Other options. So there are several vendors shipping both top and bottom M2 hat support for NVMe drives. And the bottom mount, as I mentioned, can handle the physically longer drives, so it doesn't interfere with your USB and Ethernet port use. And the RP1 Southbridge handles higher I/O throughput. And here's why they use this chip, because it increases the aggregate USB bandwidth, which was an issue on the 3B. That's why the Ethernet couldn't run at full speed. So you're having faster transfer speeds to external UAS, which is USB attached SCSI drives. They're not as common as you might think, but there are some out there. And sometimes they're implemented, UAS drives are implemented with a SATA 3 implementation with an adapter that converts it to UAS format, which isn't full speed, but it does work. And then other high-speed peripherals, the 2-lane MIPI camera and display interfaces that was on the earlier models have a 4-lane 1.5 gigabit per second MIPI transceiver, and that triples the bandwidth. Okay, and supporting combination of 2 cameras or displays. So you can use this for the camera capture, or you can use it for a high-speed display. It also increases the SD card performance, although that usually wasn't too much of a problem. But I would think that most people trying to use this are going to either use a one of these hats to plug in an NVMe drive, or they're going to interface it with USB 3 to an external drive, which also still works. And I imagine that is cranked up in speed as well. So if you have an external USB drive that you're using, have at it. Also, there is support for the SDR104, which is an older technology, which ancestors back to some of the Adafruit designs, high-speed mode. And the single lane PCI Express is available as well. All right. Now, is it available? Well, up until recently, there have been backlogs, and the quoted backlog is stated as 8 weeks. But they are available. I happen to just check DigiKey, and they have items in stock. So I'm assuming if you click on it and order it, they could ship it to you. They also have some of the other things that you probably will need to support this, like USB power supplies with the right wattage that will work okay. The hat that used to run the cooling fan, that's like $5 or something. And they have cables and other things as well. And I did see notes that the 5 does run cooler than the 4, but having that fan cooler would probably be a really good idea. So that's pretty much what I have here. Let me hit the stop share and let me post this to the chat. Let's see, there's the chat. All right, and now, no, where's the one that says share with this? Format file, good. My computer, thank you. Desktop. That's the one I want. Open and share. Okay, so everybody in the chat, I have sent a copy of the presentation if you want to reference it. There is a world of information available on the Raspberry Pi. Let me pull some of those things over here. Got to go to my network connection. All right. Unless my other computer is turned off, and I hope not. Give me a second here. It does not want to seem to access that. And I don't want to have to run over there and grab it via SneakerNet either. No, it's not going to let me access it. Unfortunately, let's do this. Let's do a refresh. Can't find my network path. So it's either my machine is powered down because it got unplugged. Yeah, it's possible. No, I was going to, you can look online if you want to pull down the Raspberry Pi 5 specs. 5 specs. And it's on the Raspberry Pi. Let's see if I can find this one. I think this is the one. Data sheets. There we go. Let me share this one, and that will show. Share screen. So let's close that. Good. So the specs for any of the old Raspberry Pis, the 3B, 4, 5, are all online at the raspberrypi.com website. And you can get all of the details, the layout of it. I do know this, if you had cases that you had designed for Raspberry Pi 3, they're not going to fit the 5. You're probably going to end up with a different case for it, just because some of these things have changed locations on it. But you can see the profile that it's not large, and it's, you know, pretty good. Let's see if I have a picture. I had a picture on the other computer. I had more information. Unfortunately, it's not going to be with me right now. But if you want to, like I said, get cases for it, there's other things that Raspberry Pi. You can see all of the options that are there. There's the RP1 chip that I was mentioning that has, they finally designed their own silicon in-house to be able to do some of the stuff and reduce the part count. There's the Broadcom chipset that is used, that has the quad core in it, that the cooler. Oh, I think I got a picture of the cooler. Let's see. There's the one with the active cooler, which for $5 you get a lot of aluminum there. But it's got a little small fan, and this all helps pull the heat out of the chip. So with an active cooler, yes, it's got a moving part, but much better design that you can use to keep it running at full speed. Raspberry Pis, what they would do, if you ran too much computing on them, they would slow the clock down to accommodate the lack of having the heatsink on the processor. So even if you put your own heatsink on the processor, it would monitor its own temperature. And if the temperature started climbing, well, it would slow down the processor so that it wouldn't overheat further. Not a bad idea. Unlike some PCs I know, which will just cook themselves, depending on what you're running on them. But yeah. So, all right, questions? All silent. That what you're looking for, Carl? You're going to go out and get one now?
What's a common use for a Raspberry Pi? Education?
Raspberry Pi, you could have this thing, put a box around it, put the fins and cooler on it, put a keyboard and mouse on it, and hook it up to your TV set and use it for either a general purpose terminal. I mean, anything that a Linux machine can do, you can do pretty much on a Raspberry Pi, because it's running a Linux, it's running a Debian Linux. If you wanted to turn this into the processing power for your own network attached storage, within the limitations of going through USB connections and or the PCI interface through the hat to do the NVMe, you could have, like I said, 1 or 2 disks for storage, and basically there's software out there to do your own NAS storage. What do you use a NAS for? Well, if you've ever downloaded movies and needed some place to park them, and you have a Roku, that's a great way to display your content. If you have Plex, if you purchased a Plex license and for your Roku, run the other half on the server and watch all of your video content to your heart's delight. There's a number of other things you can do once you have a Plex server involved as well. They do support some online streaming content as well.
Yeah, Carl, basically any Raspberry Pi, by and large, you are running Linux, you are not running Windows.
Hopefully.
But in some cases, that might be better, because I can see where Windows is going to go. It's going to keep on wanting a bigger and faster machine. That
Yes.
isn't exactly the cheapest thing to get at this point in time. I mean, the cost of machines has come down, but right now, your limit is somewhere around a 7th generation or 8th generation chipset if you want to run Windows 11. If you don't have it, you might be able to run it for now, but give a couple spins of Windows 10 going away and Windows 11 coming into its own, they'll start to retire those non-standard chipsets, and then you'll have to go find another machine. And if you want to play Microsoft's game, that's what you do. But if you don't want to play Microsoft's game and you want to strike out on your own and you just need a web browser, I mean, if you have a web browser, think about it. You could have Office that runs in a web app and basically do a lot of the stuff you normally would want to do elsewhere. And as long as there's an HDMI connection on the TV set, you can probably display a lot on those, especially the larger screens. Might be easier to read than this little small 15-inch screen. Other things you can do with it. I know that Raspberry Pis can be used to support cameras. So you can put a camera on it and have it basically become the same thing as some of the Blink cameras are offering you right now. But you could go ahead and do other things with it, if you want to do your different capture, different recognition. Depends on how much software you want to write as opposed to what you can find that's already been written. Other questions? You don't have one yet, Sid? You have to unmute if you're going to talk back.
Yeah, I just realized I was muted, which
Better
sometimes is
mute.
better than it. I should just do sign language type stuff instead. I own multiple pies. I won them at events. I bought the original Pi when it first came out. I got in before they ran out of the first load of them. So I have a few Pis. I don't tend to do much with them. And here's the question to ask, Ed, is given how cheap some of these small PCs are now, does it make sense to go with a Pi when you can get a full mini system with memory, with disk and everything, ports and everything else, case, power supply for under $200?
Well, depends on what you're running on it. And if you're happy to do your own thing with a 3rd or 4th generation Intel chip that's not going to run Windows 11, sure, you could run Linux on it.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
I've got-
it'll work fine, and it's integrated for you. However, if you want to ever interface to a lower level, yeah, like what he's got.
what
If you
I've
want to
got
interface to a lower level where you need the Berg connections, well, if you start plugging in something with a USB header or something and you're trying to interface something to it, it's a little more difficult.
I've got 5 machines about the same size. They're 7 by 7 inches, and this is the only one that will not run 11.
Mm-hmm.
This now, when I say that, I gotta do that tongue in cheek. This one was one generation back. I put in a 7th gen processor, which will not handle Windows 11. You got to have 8 or higher.
Mm-hmm.
And I got it specifically to run Linux. And but at the same time too, if I really wanted to, I can put 11 on here, run it unsupported, and it'll work just fine.
Yeah, as long as they support Windows 11 on unsupported targets. And at some point in time, what Microsoft giveth, Microsoft can take away.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
No question about that. But I wouldn't myself worry about it because bottom line, I have quite a few native running Windows 11 compliant machines. But the thing is, you got another little gotcha. Actually, two gotchas. Gotcha number one, 24H2 for 11 will not support any core, any Intel chip prior to Core i series. So you got to have a Core i first gen, second gen, third gen, fourth gen on forward, or it will not boot. So I do have a Core 2 quad. That's not going to work. It will not boot up. So I either have to stay on 23H2 or retire that machine to use for Linux or something else. But I look at the support and unsupport from a standpoint that you have to understand. Supported and unsupported means, do you call Microsoft when you have a problem to have them resolve it? You have to have a supported version. If you never call Microsoft to help you out with a problem, then you could run Windows 11 unsupported, and as long as you're on a sufficiently advanced machine, even though it's not 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th, or 14th gen, you're fine. The other gotcha is starting with the 14th gen Intel chip, and I think it's the Series 7000 AMD Ryzen chip. Some, not all the chips, have an NPU in it, neural processing unit. And that's going to become more and more needed. And I think they delayed Windows 12 this fall for sometime next year so that more machines can get on the market with the NPU built in. There may be some machines, they will not have the CPU chip with NPU in it. They may have an NPU chip on the motherboard to do the same function. It's a hardware accelerator, very much like a plug-in graphics card with its own discrete memory. And it'll accelerate things. Some graphic cards will do some of the hardware acceleration for AI, but how well they'll do it compared to an NPU, I don't know. I don't think anybody knows the answer to that yet. The other is a third thing, so to speak, I've read recently. Some outfit has come up with a new super NPU and suggests that AMD and Intel, and probably ARM too, get out their ink pens and sign a contract as quick as possible, because that would be even better than the NPU they're distributing right now on some chips.
Well, it depends on, like I said, how far you want to be close to the bleeding edge of technology, and what your intent for using the machine is in the first place.
Right.
I mean, if you're just balancing a checkbook, it's not going to take a lot of machine to do that. But
No,
if
you
you're
can go
sitting
out-
there asking the computer to do the balancing of the checkbook for you with voice commands, it might need a little bit more help.
Yeah, well, I mean, if your former scenario, you can go to like Walmart, Best Buy, et cetera, and for probably under $300, you can get a machine that's either Celeron or Pentium based, and be happy with that. But if you want a real power of 11, you're going to need something a little more substantial in processing unit, and now you're starting to go like $450 up.
Okay. Still hear me okay? I bumped my connector here by mistake.
No, that wasn't a mistake. That was deliberate. The little gremlins got it.
Yeah, yeah, that was my only audio faux pas here. Okay. No, I have to look at new machines for some of the stuff that we've had working at our church that will no longer be adequate. We also have to upgrade to the latest version of QuickBooks because that's going away soon. On the 2021 version of QuickBooks goes away, and in mid-May, I think, the end of May, it is no longer supported, which means your payroll is no longer there either. So between the two of those, you got to go to QuickBooks Online, and that's the only other option that I know that exists, unless somebody else has heard of another copy of QuickBooks that still runs in your local machine.
Well, I hope the one in the cloud improved a lot. I know when that first started coming out, Bert Good, a CPA, said it was garbage.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. However, the way they try and do it now makes it a little less cumbersome than it was when it first came out. So what you do is you migrate your data to the cloud. It's up in the cloud, but then you download an app that runs on your computer, which restores some of the equivalent lookalike local function that you used to have. So your data is in the cloud, but you can have an app on the local machine, and that helps buffer the information before it gets updated in the cloud. And it makes it easier to share among multiple users then too. So the standard discounted license through TechSoup is like $75, I think, right now. So, and I see Terry has decided to join, but he's running a little late.
Terry's always late.
Yes. So I was looking at replacing, like I said, some of the hardware. It still runs Win 10. It's, I think, 4th generation Intel, so it's not going to move to 11. I'm still considering like a replacement desktop rather than a laptop, just because the desktop machines seem to last a lot longer. That machine was originally put into service in 2013. And other than the addition of an SSD, it's still basically the same machine. And it was refurbed when we purchased it. So I will probably be looking for another refurb machine that will handle Windows 11.
Well, I'll give the rest of the people my 2 cents. Most of the machines out there that most of the people have is consumer grade machines. If you get them to last 5 years, let alone beyond that, it's only because you know what the heck you're doing with the hardware. The majority of people won't even get to the 5 years probably. I've got more and more pieces of equipment that are business class. They go to a higher level of components and support. And most of the business class machines that I've got are over 5 years old, and they're going strong.
Yeah, I that's what I've always recommended is either refurbed business equipment. That's what this machine is. This is a refurbed 11-year-old machine. And my other machines that I've used are equal in age. Designed probably in 2010, 2011, picked and acquired in 2013. So yeah, they're still.
Yeah, all of these are business class machines. There's HP, Dell, Lenovo, and you might find a few other brands as well. I didn't go that deep into it. All of mine are either HP or Dell, and they do very, very well and hold up well. The machine that was giving me the most problem because of probably Copilot more than anything else, doesn't want to recognize my webcam now. And it says it's a permission setting, which is BS unless they're not showing me the permission that's having the problem. But anyway, that's a business class machine, and it's circa 2008 or 2009. I got it refurbished, and it's been going ever since. So I mean, gee whiz. What do you want? I mean, compared to the consumer class, you ought to get about twice the life out of a business class machine that you will out of consumer class, and I'm already exceeding 3 times that level.
Well, it depends also, like I said, like, and just in terms of laptops, I was cognizant of the way that HP business class laptops handled the battery versus consumer grade. All of the Asuses and the Panasonics and the Toshibas and those that every time you plugged them in, they would fully charge the battery to 100%. And continue to trickle charge the battery because they had no way of running the charging mechanism separate from the operation of the machine. And with the business class HPs, the charging element is separate within the motherboard from the operation of the machine. So you could run the machine off of the power pack, but not be charging the battery. So if the battery is at 92% or higher, it does not touch the battery unless you have a power failure, and then it immediately can use the battery. If it drops below 92, then it will charge it up to 100% and stop charging it. So you can use a laptop as a desktop in those kind of modes. But with a consumer grade, I would never use a laptop like a desktop. You know, either use it laptop and portable and then plug it in when you need to, but it's a good thing that some of the consumer grade laptop batteries are cheap.
Some of them, yes, some of them are very expensive.
Yeah.
At least for my
The rare ones are expensive. The common ones are less expensive. Or you'll have somebody be ripping apart the plastic shell to rebuild it. So,
well, that's like anything that the more products that use the subcomponent, the cheaper the subcomponent is.
yeah.
And that includes batteries.
Yeah.
And if you want another headache area, it's if you got to replace your screen, the more machines out there that use the same screen, the cheaper they are. The fewer there are, man, it can cost you a fortune for a replacement screen.
I mean, when I was looking at alternative, like replacement laptops, when I first was looking for this one about 8 years ago, I happened to was just sort of started looking for laptops. I was looking for HP commercial type of laptops, but so many of them had the old 1368 by 1360 by 768 resolution. And I wanted something with at least 1920 by 1080 or higher. And the difference when you bought the machine between those two resolution screens was $60. For $60 more, you could have the higher resolution screen because both of them had a PCI graphics adapter to drive it.
Right, and the irony is that in the past, the difference between just those two resolutions was several $100s.
Yeah.
Now it's getting to the point where who cares almost, and more you're seeing what's called the 1440p, which is twice the HD 720p. And if you can handle the smaller type without doing zooming on the font or the general screen in general, or using a lower resolution, it can be a great thing. But when you start going past 1440p, you might as well be using it as a TV set.
Yeah, could. Yeah, I've used, like I said, some of the the touchscreen laptops have much higher resolutions, but touchscreen, yeah, if it's a touchscreen, fine. If it's not a touchscreen, that would work fine with me too.
Well, if you have to replace a touchscreen,
Yeah,
boy, that's really going to cost you because it's a double layer. It's the touch grid in clear plastic over the top of a regular, ordinary display screen.
right.
And that costs big money.
Hmm. Yeah,
So you got to be careful what you wish for.
yeah,
How good are you with your equipment? If you're real good handling your equipment, especially portable stuff, great. If you are lousy and break things quite easily and frequently, I would stay away from the touchscreen. At least
yeah.
that way you got a chance of it being less expensive to repair, unless you got lots of money and don't care. You toss out the machine and get a new one.
Yeah. Well, the other thing about using Raspberry Pis or using a like a cheaper Intel machine would be how close do you want the code to be to something that might be running on a tablet or a phone?
Yeah.
Because most of the phones and tablets now are running the ARM processors.
Well, that's the thing, and this is a little beef I've got is I have not found a way of getting a copy of Windows 10 or 11 on ARM. You have to buy a manufactured machine from everything I can find.
Well, the thing that when I had looked into that, it really wasn't Windows 10 or 11 really running on ARM. It was something that would support the operation of executables on that ARM machine to basically work within a Windows environment. So
But
that's
that,
different. It's like a compatibility feature rather than it's not a full native Windows 10 port with all the bells and whistles. It's a very restricted subset.
okay. Well,
So
maybe
you
I didn't.
really don't get, I mean, if you wanted to, if you had an app that ran on Windows and you targeted it for the Windows 10 running on ARM, it could basically do the code generation for ARM, but it was restricted on really what it would be able to do.
I didn't spot that piece of information.
It is exceedingly limited. It's more for I'm going to download an app that's going to use the ARM test bed as a sensor platform or something and use it to capture information and then transmit it to a network connection perhaps. So you're front ending your machine with this ARM based machine. And you
No,
could do the development on your big machine and then port the app down to the Windows 10 environment on the other machine.
well,
So
uh, scuttlebutt going along that is, I think it's Qualcomm has a new chip that is based on ARM that might be a competitor for Apple's Silicon. And if that holds water, who knows? Maybe you can really put a full version of Windows on it that's been designed to work on that kind of a chip.
as long as you know the restrictions of the ARM architecture, I mean, I programmed on a the ARM architecture is actually based on the old MIPS 3000 chipset that used to run on some of the old tandem computers. And when I was porting stuff to it that was written in C, I had to realize that unlike the Intel processors and the PDP-11s and the DEC processors that preceded it, there was no way to implement. You had a stack pointer, but you didn't have a frame pointer. Those are two very important programming registers to use when you're referencing with C language. The stack pointer gets pushed down every time you push, you're going to call a subroutine, and your parameter stack is passed on the system stack as well. And the frame pointer points to the previous stack pointer so that you know where your parameters are as referenced from that frame pointer on up. But with ARM architecture, you only have a pseudo frame pointer, which is calculated from where the stack pointer is currently. Makes it rather difficult to implement what's called set jump, long jump, which are ways you can access. It's a way you can do multitasking on a ARM processor or any processor written in, with programs written in C. With set jump and long jump, you can set a set jump to be acted upon when a certain condition occurs. And when you detect that condition, whether it's down in an interrupt or in the OS or somewheres, you can long jump to it, do what you need to clear up the situation, and then go back to the caller and return to what you were supposed to be doing. It's a way of scheduling IO between multiple overlapping IOs and those kinds of operations. But I was able to build one of those. Yeah, it was about enough to drive you crazy. So, but I had to write that in basically MIPS assembly language, which does exist for the chipsets that they're currently using. Yes. Other questions? I don't think, Terry, did you have a question? No, I just had you raise your hand for a while there. So has anybody attempted to allow Copilot unrestricted use of your system?
No, never will.
Well, it sounded like some of the stuff that Copilot tried to do to your system caused it to declare your video as an intruder.
Well, part of the problem there, and I already know that for a fact, I buttoned down a lot of the privacy stuff, turning the stuff off. I even have a third-party app that turns off some features. And in trying to get ready for the presentation on Tuesday, I took and had to figure out all the things I had to undo. It's getting regular Copilot to work where you type in your question or whatever it is you're looking for out of Copilot. That's the easy part. When you want to use the microphone and have it dictated and it reads back to you your response, then that's where you run into setting problems. And it's was really, in a certain sense, easier on the 11 machine than it was on the 10. The 10, I was going through all kinds of nightmares, but I'm on the 10 machine right now because the 11 isn't working. And so there's a setting conflict I got to run down. And once I run that to ground, then I'll probably have everything working correctly. But right now, anytime I bring up Zoom, it says that the camera won't work and the microphone won't work. On 10 here, at first, it wasn't working. I had to reboot twice and finally got it to come up and recognize the webcam moved from the 11 machine to the 10 and work correctly. That's how I'm on here right now. But normally I would have the webcam over on the 11 machine. And when I'm done here, I'll be going over there to try and use the webcam and see if I can debug what is causing the internal conflict, because it's not showing up. It keeps asking me, do you want me to bring up settings? And it goes to the same place every darn time. and everything looks copacetic. So there's something else hidden that it's
Mhm.
not telling you.
It's gonna be a registry setting that isn't displayed on those screens.
Most likely. Most
It's
likely.
it's sort of like my problem that I mentioned earlier, before everyone else joined, where my Outlook 2016 on two different machines, more prevalent on the slower machine, um, keeps asking for the credentials for the password. It remembers the user ID, but it keeps on asking for the password to resync with Outlook.com. And one would think Outlook.com, you guys should know each other. But then they are trying to wind down support for Office 2016 and want you to move. And I'm not quite ready to move to the Outlook 365 version of Outlook because I'm sure I'm going to miss something when I move across, because unfortunately on the machine that I was going to try and download it on, you can't keep your Outlook 2016 without removing it if you want to try Outlook 365.
Really?
Yes, it says you must remove this other one. You must remove the intruder so I can have complete use of your machine.
Yeah, well, that's the
Hmm.
problem. If Microsoft, this is my own opinion, if Microsoft wants to control everything about how your computer runs with Windows, okay, I'll go along with that. But Microsoft's going to buy every person who wants a computer with Windows on it their own computer, and then they can have total control. And until somebody pulls the plug on the electricity, and then Microsoft can't touch it until they plug it back in.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll see on that. It's just aggravating. I've gotten to a point where on the other machine that this thing frequently pops up, I am automatically loading a web browser, firing up Outlook, having it linked up and active before I load Outlook. The app, and then sometimes it's happily connected, doesn't bother me at all.
Well, that's one of the problems that between Outlook on the desktop, Outlook.com. It's confusing to the majority of people what they are, and they would presume reasonable compatibility between the two, but that doesn't always follow true.
No, doesn't, definitely not. Well, just the fact that I would have thought that Outlook would work with Outlook, but obviously not. It's just they're trying to force me to move to something else that I don't have, or I've already purchased one, so then they want me to move to it, but we'll see. If I get a new computer, I won't try and install the standalone Office. I'll just go with the Outlook 365 local copy of the apps and see how that works. So the small computers that you're using, those are the micro form factors. How much
Yes.
memory do those typically have?
It depends upon which power level you have. Certain models can only go up to 16, and other models go up to 32.
Okay.
And as far as storage, they have usually a chassis to hold a 2.5-inch spinning or a solid state SATA drive, or a motherboard M.2 SATA or NVMe. I use the NVMe, but I do have one model that has capacity for two of them. All of them have the capacity for an M.2 Wi-Fi card, and two different kinds of antennas can be incorporated. One, to me, looks like it could be short range, and what I prefer is, let me.
The external one with the two antennas?
Yeah, well, no, I'm using only one antenna, and basically the unit is some of them might have a punch out for two antenna, but most of them only have a punch out for one here. Only one of these 5 machines even came with the antenna type. The
Mhm.
others had no Wi-Fi at all, so I added them, and I bought 2 kits with 2 antennas and 2 wires, and I only use 1 wire to the Wi-Fi card, and that's it.
So it depends on if those cards it depends on the Wi-Fi card design, whether the connection on the motherboard on that board is for the 2.5 gigahertz radio or the 5 gigahertz radio, or they mix both of them.
You get
And
both.
it's running as a dual antenna setup.
If you can have 7265, there's an 8000 and a 9000 series, but it sounds like the 8 and 9000, which I haven't investigated, you have to get into an AX router, so that you can take full advantage of the higher frequencies that are in the AX band. And
Well, the AX band is that's the 6 gigahertz band.
right,
Yeah, if you are using that, but
right,
then most of the rest of your equipment may not support that.
that's right.
So they could share data basic back and forth. Like if it's a printer, he might be hooked up on the 2.4, and he'll just have to go through the Wi-Fi router to be able to get to the other connections.
Right, and it's just a case where right now for one pair of those antennas with the pigtails,
Mhm.
I could put the Wi-Fi in on 2 of them. I just have to put in a card as well, which I had to buy, and it seems to work fine most of the time, especially with if you were running 10 or 11. But I was having a problem with that on Linux, and apparently it didn't like the Intel 7265, so I had to get a compatible old Linux type card that's in the M.2 format, stick it in, and I eventually solved my problem. So I've
You
got,
could have also used a USB 3 network card too, and that would probably be just as fast.
well, I have these here. I don't know how well you can see them, but that's USB 3. You can plug in. It does have, it should have compatibility with even Linux as far as that goes, though I didn't play with that yet. And but generally speaking, these things work good. They look like the guts of a laptop, but it would be business class laptop. It uses the SODIMMs. It has it uses a fan to cool the memory chips that also blows air over a, I'll call it a non-traditional heatsink that's almost all copper, and
Yeah,
it blows out the
that's
back.
like a laptop a laptop heatsink for a processor.
Yeah, and
So it's got copper fins and got cooling liquid that goes to the chip.
well, I've got one machine I would like to change the processor on, but I'm not sure that I'm going to ever be able to do it. But it uses a Ryzen 2400G, and if you want, that and a few other models have a extra little, I'll call it a socket on the motherboard, and you can actually get a 4 gigabyte discrete graphics card you can put in the machine on HP. On
Okay.
Dell, the Optiplexes anyway, I have found no aftermarket option for that. You would have to order it as a new machine from Dell, wanting that discrete graphics capability.
Right.
But it's
Okay.
an interesting sideline, and from what I have seen, that graphics card, if you got it, you can get about $60. And but the bad part, you have to get at least a 150-watt power supply. Depending on where you get it, it would cost about $40. So you figure $100, any shipping and any sales tax you might have to pay. Yeah,
This one's 200
Yeah.
watts.
well, I don't have to go that high happily, but in general, most of the machines I've got run on a 90 watt. But if I lightened up a bit, I could probably run them on 65 watt.
Well, that's one of the differences between Intel old machines and running something like Raspberry Pi. Raspberry Pi, here's this upscale Raspberry Pi 5 that needs a 27-watt power supply.
Yeah.
And you're not going to find any PCs that run anything less than 65 watt.
Oh, no, you can get the real light ones that'll go down to about 35 watt, but it's rare.
Well, that's like I said, those are the skinnied ones, but most of the conventional ones, the
Yes.
small form factor power
Yes.
outlet, those are 65 watt.
Right.
Because I've looked at a number of them, like, yeah, that's a 65 watt power supply. That'll run my old HP Compact 6910. Yeah, that used to use the small one as well, and they would burn out occasionally. Pushed them a little too hard. Separate note, for those of you that have a fair number of IoT type devices that are connected via Wi-Fi, have you found that your 2.4 gigahertz LANs are a little bit on the slow side if you try and use it for anything else?
A little bit, but nothing draconian because I'm not. I don't have as many IoTs running in my house.
Well, I happen to have a fair number of devices that only connect on 2.4, and I'm either going to have to move them to their own access point in the near future because of the interference that they cause when I'm trying to use 2.4 for longer range with my phones and with my laptop. Because I've noticed if it's really sluggish and it's not operating, I just check to see which Wi-Fi I associate it with. And if it's the 2.4 gigahertz SSID, switching it to the 5 immediately fixes the problem, which means that there's too much contention for the medium with all my IoT devices. I mean, I have probably about 6 or 7 Wemo devices. I have at least 2 webcams that are Wi-Fi connected and they're not going through the slower speed. But then the sync adapters for the things like the doorbell also use Wi-Fi. So all told, I may have 30 some odd devices if I include the Rokus and other devices that are out there that are all vying for that 2.4 gigahertz.
Yeah,
Some of the Rokus can be operated on 5, and I try and push them to that. But if for some reason it stumbles on 5, it'll fall to 2 and it won't want to move back.
Yeah, I would say I've probably got maybe 1/3 the number of devices you've got offhand because I do have a security system with a doorbell, and I have some Wi-Fi plugs or bulbs, and I really I would have to say my ideal is I have 2 routers. So I can literally put all the IoTs on one router and still have regular 2.4 on the other router, different channel sets to keep them.
Yeah, I mean,
separate.
I can set it up with additional access points. I mean, I'm running a dual band router on one side, and I'm running a separate AP access point on another set of frequencies. But some of them share the same SSID, so I have ubiquitous coverage as I walk through the house. But I have, like both SSIDs are being broadcast on both the router and the access point because it's a dual band access point. So, but yeah, your mileage may vary. So, any other questions here? Any other?
Any guys, this Apple lawsuit, you think Apple's guilty?
Is Apple guilty?
course they
Of
are.
course they're a monopoly.
They
How
are?
did they get so big?
Really?
How do you think Apple got to be a trillion corporation, even though they lost 3% today? Bottom
Well, they're
line,
keeping their competitors
hey,
out, I guess. Isn't
and-
that the main thing?
Terry, all you got to do is look at Europe. Europe is driving everybody nuts, especially the tech companies. And you either play a ball their way or you are not allowed to operate. Period.
Yeah.
Well, it's getting that direction here too.
Yeah, not quite as far gone. Europe, even the power connectors are now required to be standard.
Well, they're trying to get more competition out there and less it's my way or the highway.
Yeah,
That's the bottom
mean,
line.
it'll be interesting.
either,
Depends
play-
on how long it takes to resolve.
You either play fair, which is allows any competition to do their thing within reason that doesn't cause malware and other kind of things that might occur in such an environment, or they're not going to let you play nice by levying. I forget what the last European amount of money was, but it was like about 400 and some odd million, something like that, dollars, just a fine. And the only way they could probably mitigate that is by playing by the EU rules.
Mhm.
Well, California is getting much in the same direction, and there are other states that are looking to follow California in that respect here in the United States. What do you want?
Yep.
Monopoly is a monopoly, and that's why DOJ is going after them. DOJ, in particular, is the one who busts up monopolies in the past, and therefore they are the present and the future. There's nothing that's a big surprise there, and they went after Microsoft in the past. Well, the way things are going right now, DOJ may be starting to look hard at Microsoft too.
I like that, Sid. Nice poem.
I had to do it that way. It wouldn't let me copy paste out of a command window, and I have no idea why. It would only let me, it would not go on the text. I don't know. So instead I did a quick screen cap and put it in just so I would get it in.
Okay, cool.
I found the answer, friends. I found the answer here. The old this is the ultimate car for me here. It's a Model 3 long range. It's 24,293. What
Mhm.
that means is it's under the $25,000 threshold, so you get the $4,000 credit on your taxes. Used car credit, which is really cool. So you take 4,000 off that, you're getting you're paying 20,300
Uh-huh.
for a long range Model 3, which still has plenty of warranty left on it.
Yeah, but it's probably in displays and you have to charge it yourself.
It two things this one has. It's called rent to own,
Very good.
which means you could rent it for up to 3 days. If you decide to buy it, they don't charge you the rental. You just pay for the car. If you
Mhm.
don't like it, you just pay the special rental rate for
Uh-huh.
1 to 3 days that you use it, or you can take it for 2 hours for a test drive if you want to do that. Which is kind of cool. It comes with a 1-year Hertz warranty in addition to the car warranty, which is not really not too bad of a deal for 20
No.
grand for a long range. Is fairly good. Oh, and it comes with home delivery. They drop it off at your door if you want.
Now, what does it cost for the home charger?
I'm guessing what, a couple grand to put in a 220 port.
Oh,
It's more than, well, that's a slow charger at 220. That means it'll charge in what, 14 hours? Something like that.
I don't know.
Well,
It won't charge
the
in 50 minutes or whatever it is that they claim on the supercharger, because you don't have a 500-volt power supply.
The other thing that I would look into is you probably won't get any tax breaks because it's a used car. Number
No,
two,
go on.
Number two, you have to pay in many states the gasoline tax because it's an electric vehicle. And number
$248 for a license in the Chicago area, in the Illinois area.
Okay. And then you have also what is it going to cost when it's out of warranty and you need a whole new set of batteries?
It's got 6 years remaining on the battery warranty. After
That's actually
6
not a
years,
bad deal, but the batteries usually last a lot longer than the warranty.
Yeah, they
that part's
tend to
good, but
last.
eventually, if you hold it the car long enough, you're gonna need a new set of batteries. What does that run?
I've had my
Probably-
Prius for now it's a 2010 Prius, and I've had it since 2011, and the batteries are just fine.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They only had
As
an
to
8-year
the-
warranty on the batteries.
Into the tax credit, they added a used car credit, which is what this shows. 30% of the price up to $4,000. The model has to be at least 2 years old. This is, and it
Yeah.
has to be under 25,000, and this is 24,900. So it falls under that cap limit. Then you
As
just
long as
have
they
to
don't
be
add the
on
dock fee to you.
it doesn't count as part of the dealer. It also has to be a dealer, not an individual sale, because they have to actually file the IRS on
Right.
the sale. So it's a $4,000 credit on this car because 30% of the 25-ish gives you the full. So again, you're talking right around 20K.
Yeah.
With as I said, plenty of battery warranty left and plenty of car warranty left. Not a bad, and it's a long range on top of that, which is not a bad deal.
What's
Well,
long
sounds like
range?
a
2
plan.
blocks?
Long range, no. If I click on, hold on, all I got to do is click on this button here, and then click here and click on this. Whoops, sorry. Too many buttons on my desktop right now. Not you, and you. Here's the actual battery for this particular car, complete with the VIN number at the top. Expected range on the long range is 329 to 330 miles. Battery warranty left is 5 years, 9 months. It's an 82 kilowatt hour battery. Even in winter, estimated range is 240, between 168 and 245. But that's not, I mean, I don't know about you guys. I don't tend to drive the massive distances.
Well, since we're having warmer winters, you should do pretty good on the batteries. compared to our former normal winters, in which case you may have to push the car around in the snow.
So this one gets about 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which looks like it gets better than any of the electric trucks. The one that's out there, the what is it? The electric Silverado has got maybe almost a 500-mile range, but the battery on that is so huge it only has like about a 2 mile per kilowatt hour. There was a thing that I saw on one of my feeds today on a website that showed all of these trucks. They had a Tesla Cybertruck, they had a Rivian, they had a Ford 150 Lightning, and they had the Silverado, the electric Silverado. I can't remember the name for that one. And whether they would be able to reach their stated range with the batteries they had. And as they were doing this, they actually tested this on a section of interstate out there near Nebraska and Wyoming. And to make sure that they could bring these cars home, they had a truck pulling a diesel generator with a fast charger. so they could charge it up to bring it home and stuff like that. But they would run these things until they absolutely couldn't go any further. And only like the Cybertruck was a little bit shy of its rated. The I think the Rivian was okay. The Ford F-150 did not make its rated range, but the Silverado did manage to make its range. But again, it had a much larger battery than any of the other trucks.
Yeah. If you notice, its combined fuel economy, 26 kilowatt hours per 100 miles.
And that's about 4 miles per kilowatt hour. Pretty darn close. I got the same number by dividing 330 by 82.
Ed, how's your wife doing?
She's doing well. She just came home a couple minutes ago. She was out at bell choir practice. But she had as I mentioned earlier, she had a pulmonary thromboendarterectomy. And the surgeon showed me a picture of the blood clots that they pulled out of the arteries to her lungs. And they've got all these things on a background and showed some of them were quite large.
Wow.
You know, it's kind of, scary. But I happened to watch, there's some commercials for Northwestern Medicine that are on our local TV channels lately.
Yeah.
And they show Dr. Malazery and Dr. Kutica are on this thing, and this guy is talking about his surgery, which sounds the same thing my wife had. And I'm pointing out to your wife, there's your doctors, they're on TV. You know those guys. But yeah, it was it's interesting. We're just starting to see some of the things come through. Good thing I had Medicare with a supplement. The only thing we've had to pay so far this year is $240 deductible.
Is she taking a full recovery or?
She's into her cardiac rehab started today, but she's not driving yet, but she should be able to soon.
Good. Well,
when she feels up to it, she can drive. She's got
good.
less out of breath and breathlessness and stuff like that. That's pretty much diminished significantly. And it's still a period where you're building up to it. And they still need to do other work coming up that they may want to go and do some more x-rays and another right heart catheterization where they go in and some of the pieces that they couldn't get to because of the size of the clots, they may have to do a balloon catheterization to push those out of the way if they think it's worth it. But it depends. If she's got no issues and it doesn't have to risk it, then she may decide not to do that.
Where was the clot by her clot or clot by her?
The clots were all on the arteries going to the lungs in various spots.
Wow.
Oh,
And the reason they thought this happened.
For you, so,
yeah, the reason they thought that this happened, Dr. Malazery said, he was trying to figure out, well, what would have caused this? And the thing he pointed to was the fact that when she had her hip replacements, they did not put her on blood thinners.
Oh, Jesus.
So they did not put, although they had, because she didn't have a history of any blood clot or anything like that, or any high pressure in the heart area at all. They just, didn't think it was needed. And obviously, so now she's on warfarin, and we have to monitor that, but that's a lot cheaper than some of the other drugs that were out there. The other drugs that were out there, Eliquis is, before you get the thing into your medication with Part D, it's $1,500 for that first fill, which is knocked down to your $500 deductible. And if that works okay, but if you had to go on something like a Adempas, which does specifically the hypertension between the heart and the lung, that's $14,875 for a 30-day fill.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
Not cheap, not cheap.
Well, we're happy for you and your wife, anyway.
Thank you. Okay, if there's anything else for the good of the cause, we are reached our time, I believe. So I will go ahead and stop the recording here. Yes.